Rania, you've told the story of the Syrian civil war through portraits of people you've met over the years, 4 of them. And I want you to start by telling us a little about the girl called Ruha that you met, a young child. You met her 6 or 7 years ago. What's happened to her life in the last few years?
I wanted to explain war through the eyes of a child and to show you the impact that it had on a regular family. So I tell the story of Ruha, and you see her absorbing what's happening around her, trying to understand it, and some of the challenges that she faces as a child living in very tumultuous times. Like, it's the smallest things for a little girl, like not being able to go out into her courtyard because she feared the snipers, about not being able to play out on the streets anymore. I mean, she actually says, we used to play on the streets, then we started to fear that we might be shot. This is a 9-year-old girl who has these concerns. So it just gives you an idea of how it impacts everybody, and how even a little 9-year-old can absorb everything that's happening around her, and she's trying to understand it in her own ways.
One of the political things that we've seen in Syria over the course of this war has been the growth of radicalization of Islamic extremists. It wasn't necessarily there in the beginning of the protest, but it has emerged in the country. You tell the story of a man called Muhammad who became radicalized. How? I
tell the story of 3 Al-Qaeda members in this book, and that's to illustrate the Islamization of the uprising, as you say. And all 3 characters were radicalized at different times in different ways. And Muhammad was radicalized because his family suffered from the older Assad, Hafiz al-Assad's crackdown against an earlier Islamist insurrection in the 1980s, and that, to use Muhammad's words, planted hatred in his heart. And it was a hatred that he carried with him until he saw an opportunity in 2011 to almost take revenge against the regime. And his form of revenge, or his vehicle for revenge, was Islamic radicalism.
Rania, the characters that you follow through your book and their life stories that you bring to us are important, because I worry that after 7 years of the pictures and the horror that we see on our television screens, the world has become somewhat inured to what is happening in Syria. Do you worry about that perhaps the international community has switched off?
Well, that's the reason why I chose to follow a number of characters, and to do so not just for a minute in time when you see them in a certain, after a battle, but to follow them over years so that you can get the context of their experience. And in following them also, you'll understand something about what happened in Syria on a political level, on a military level, on a social level as well. That's actually why I structured it the way that it is, because it is complicated and it is difficult to understand. And there is an alphabet soup of rebel groups that keeps changing. But in my experience of covering a place like the Middle East, if you focus on people and you tell the story through people, then you can untangle those ideologies and the complicated nature of the story. It becomes easier to understand.
Briefly, do you still go back to Syria, Rania?
I haven't gone back since late 2016, just because it's so difficult to get into. It's near impossible to get into Syria now
which is why there's not enough coverage of it. The book is No Turning Back. Rania, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you so much.